So we're going to talk first about the 4 factors of production. So you have capital. Remember, capital not as in money, but capital as in equipment and things to make other things. So plants, factories, machines, all that would be capital. The second one is entrepreneur. The third would be land. But again, not just land, but any sort of natural resource. And the fourth is labor. Look how hard this person's working.
That is hard.
I mean, he has been working that hard all year. There is not a person who has senioritis, might I add. Okay. All right, so you get demand. Demand in the labor force a little different. It is the different quantities of workers that businesses are willing and able to hire at different wages. Okay? Are you just here to do the quiz?
Yeah.
Or you... Yeah. All right. And then you have the law of demand. And here, demand still works in that inverse relationship where if wages increase, you demand less workers, and if wages decrease, you demand more workers. Okay? So you have the inverse relationship between wages and quantity of labor demanded. And Liz, when you're done, you just can put it in the orange folder. Okay? So, supply ruling, you ask? Supply is a different quantity of individuals that are willing and able to sell their labor at different wages. Now, supply is a direct relationship, which makes sense. If wages go up, more people would like to work for those wages. If wages go down, less people would like to work for those wages. So the law of supply is there's a direct relationship between wage and quantity of labor supplied. Okay, you good? No? What?
I'm gonna make sure the camera's
Okay,
working.
you can, don't worry. I'm doing it 3 times, I'll figure it out one time to get it right. All right. Ooh, that was pretty good. What you need to take away from this one is the derived demand. That derived demand is demand for resources is determined by the products they help produce. So for example, if the demand for pizza increases, you're going to need more pizza makers. Okay? If the demand for cars increase, you need more auto workers, you need more steel, you need more tires. All those are derived demand. Okay? The demand for resources is determined by the products they help produce. So now you get into marginal revenue product. Remember, marginal in economics is additional. So if you don't remember, it's always the additional revenue generated by an additional worker. Okay? So it's the additional revenue generated by an additional worker or resource. And the reason I put resource there is it can sometimes be the additional revenue generated by an additional robot. When your children are going to school, there'll be robots up here. All right, and if you remember, which I'm sure you do, there's 2 ways to figure out MRP. In perfect competition, MRP equals MP times price. So in perfect competition, MRP equals MP times price. The second way, which you could use all the time, like, so if you only want to memorize one, and you want to be fail-safe, is MRP equals change in total revenue over change in inputs. And if you want to remind yourself, even though I know you probably remember, total revenue would be just price times quantity. So change in total revenue, which is price times quantity, over change in inputs.
Can
And
you
I think I
repeat
have a
that?
chart where I'm gonna give you a couple of chances to fool around
Revenues, price
and
times quantity.
manipulate these. Okay? So then the next marginal is marginal resource factor. Okay? And that's the additional cost of additional work. Right? Now, a lot of times they might ask, what's the difference between like marginal resource cost and marginal cost? So marginal cost is the additional cost for making an additional product. The marginal resource cost, or the marginal factor cost, is the additional cost of an additional worker. And this too has kind of two formulas. In perfect competition, the marginal resource cost is always wages. All right? Which is, by the way, the perfectly elastic part in the graph. But again, if you just want a formula that always works, the marginal resource cost equals change in total cost over change in inputs. Now, typically the change in input is one additional worker. But you gotta watch it, because sometimes they get tricky, and they put two workers there just to kind of screw around with you. So again, in perfect competition, it's just the wage. Here's the formula that will work for either perfect or not perfect. Ruli, do you remember the hiring? How many to hire to?
To, show me a picture of it, I'll tell you.
No.
Oh, okay, never mind.
Only because I don't have a picture, not because I'm being mean. Do you remember?
Yeah, isn't it when you like break even with the product, so like the price of the product is given to the price of the
Now,
work?
you kind of have it, but it's not the price of the product, it's the MRP equals MRC, okay? Now, it's MRP is equal or greater. So remember, sometimes when we first did this, some of you would get confused because it wasn't perfect. You know, the number, you never want the cost to be greater than the revenue generated by the worker. Otherwise, it's not worth hiring. Okay. All right, I'm going to give you this little chart. Caution! Your chart starts at 1 and I have 0. Caution. All right, I'll give you a couple of minutes to try to figure this out. I like that you take the ones that you could just fill straight down first. Do you guys remember to do it?
I didn't have chocolate.
What?
Oh, never mind.
Remember to do it? Okay. And you could just look at the formula in the back. Okay. No problem. give you another minute. There's a sheet if you want to. If you want. You have your passes.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm gonna just flash up the numbers so you, remember, you can see, hopefully you can see that it's right. Okay, so if you just remember marginal product, you just go 17 minus 7 gives you 10, 24 minus 7, and there you get there. Where I have additional revenue per worker, that is the MRP. And again, here, if you take MP times price, that gives you 70. And it would also work if you went to change in total revenue. So say if I take the first worker, the total revenue is price times quantity is 170, minus 70 is 100. So, and then here, MP times price is 100, so either way works. If I'm looking how many workers I'm gonna hire, Maddie, how many workers would I hire? Five, right? Because you're going for MRP equals MRC there, so you'd hire 5 workers. Okay? Any questions on this? Now, if they raise the price of the product, is that going to impact how many workers I could hire? Why, really?
Because their MRP could be higher.
Yeah, because if you raise the price of the product, you could then take MP times a higher price, and you could then hire more workers. Okay? If workers are more productive, will that change? That also, because if the worker can make more, that's going to increase their MRP. Okay? Alright, so now I'm going to give you 3 determinants or shifters of demand in the labor market. And the first is change in product demand. Why? Because if you shift product demand right or left, you're changing the price. Okay? And we just talked about how change in price increases MRP, or of course could decrease. Alright? So change in product demand, price increase of the product increases MRP and the demand for resource. The second is change in productivity, which I kind of just asked you too. If workers are more productive, then they're increasing their MRP and they're allowing, then they're making themselves more valuable to the company. Now this sometimes trips kids up because you think, well, if people are more productive, then I don't need as many workers. But you're trying to make as much as possible. So every shirt I can produce at a profitable margin, I'm going to try to produce. And then the third is change in prices of other resources. So, like what happens to the demand for assembly line workers if the price of robots fall? Well, assembly line workers are out of luck. If those robots fall, and they replace me, Ms. Stedman. Okay? So there's your 3 determinants: change in product demand, change in productivity, change in price of other resources. Right now, characteristics of a perfectly competitive labor market. 1, many small firms are hiring workers. The second are workers have identical skills. And then the third is wage is constant. Okay? So many small firms are hiring, kind of like in perfect competition in the product market. Workers have identical skills, where in the product market, you can't differentiate among the product, and wage is constant. Okay. So, here is your side-by-side graph. Now, I think what happens, like they put this graph on the AP exam once or twice, And what tricks students is realizing it's the factor market. And they usually will say it's the factor or the resource market, so just read those essays carefully. But it's a typical supply and demand curve.
Zoning office, Alexander
So
C.
the
Lawson,
industry is the
zoning
same,
office.
you just gotta remember the market wage. And then this line comes across, holy cow. We just got like overzealous. Alright, this line comes across, and instead of being demand like Mr. Dark, it's supply equals MRC, and you really could say equals wage. Okay?
So it's wage and supply and MRC?
Yeah. So in perfect competition, if they ask you the wage, you know, it's right across there. And I just put a number there. Now, the demand is, again, don't make ridiculous puns. Demand in the resource market is D equals MRP. Don't make ridiculous puns. Now, I gave the situation here, what happens if new workers enter the industry? What would happen, Bennett, graphically?
The supply would shift to the right.
Okay, the supply, as Bennett said, would shift to the right. Notice more people are working. What happens to wages? Wages go down. And go.
Is that what would happen? Oh, never mind. I still don't really quite get the productivity of it.
Could you say it a little louder?
Oh, I'm sorry. If you're more productive, you're gonna hire more workers, so then you shift demand to the right, and then wages go up. That's like confusing.
Oh, if you're more productive. Yeah, and it'll, because you'll produce more, you're right.